Okie dokie, everybody. One more big clap and let us begin. Whenever the stair moves,
Did anyone else hear the news story about the Banksy artwork that shredded itself after being sold for €1 million? Well, this stunt made headlines, and some articles even said that Banksy might face criminal charges for destruction of someone else's property because his art had already been sold. So the question is, why did Banksy do it? Well, Banksy is a street artist infamous for using his art to point out the flaws that he sees in society, and this was his way of showing the ridiculousness of putting a monetary value on art. You just bought this piece of art for €1 million, and now it's destroyed. Street artists like Banksy use their art for more than just a roadside spectacle. They use it as social rhetoric to make a point. Another example of this is a street artist named Meek, who is from Australia. And one of his most famous works was done on the side of a Melbourne train station in 2004. And you've probably seen this before. It's a homeless man with a sign up that says, "Keep your coins, I want change." I will show that this is social rhetoric because of the way it advocates for change and uses psychological power in order to shape knowledge. First, I'll show that this is social rhetoric because of the way that it advocates for change, one of the factors that goes into determining something is social rhetoric. Well, in order for it to advocate for change, it of course needs to address an issue that needs changing. Well, in 2006, the Australian Bureau of Statistics reported that for every 10,000 people in Melbourne, 45.2 were homeless. For comparison, in 2017 in the US, that number was 17 homeless per 10,000 people, according to the US government. So clearly, there was an issue here, and Meek saw it on a day-to-day basis. And he decided to use his art to point it out and advocate for change. He recognized that while giving a few coins to the homeless is a nice thing to do, it doesn't address the deeper societal issues at play. And so he puts this art on the side of a train station wall in order to reach the largest audience. He brought homelessness to the forefront of people's minds and literally advocates for change, literally by stating, "I want change" in the poster. Now that I've shown how this advocates for change, I'll show that it is social rhetoric in the way that it exercises psychological power. Psychological power is defined as the power to shape thought, and that is exactly what this does. Homelessness is a problem that is very easy to ignore. In fact, many of us probably choose to look away from homeless people and walk past them without even giving them a second glance because we don't want to interact with them. By putting his art in such a public place, and Meek turns it almost into a spectacle that people want to look at and makes it a lot harder for people to turn the blind eye towards. Furthermore, Meek uses psychological power with the artwork itself. He purposefully masks the details in the face of the homeless man so that it's harder to think of him as a person, and instead, he becomes symbolic of homelessness as a problem and as a whole. And finally, Meek exercises psychological power with the words, "Keep your coins." He begins this artwork with a command that is directed straight at the reader, and that way it makes the message much more personal. Finally, now that I've shown that Meek exercises psychological power with his artwork, I'll show how he uses that psychological power in order to shape knowledge. This art turns homelessness into the common enemy of all that look at it, and it informs them that spare change isn't enough. It doesn't address the deeper problems. He uses a clever use of words in order to get this point across. With the words, "Keep your coins, I want change." Change, of course, having the double meaning that is synonymous with coins. Yes. And when I looked at this art, it definitely made me think twice about how I look at homeless people and how the people around me look at homeless people. Just because I give a $5 bill to someone on the side of the street doesn't make me a hero. I'm not actually addressing the problem, and that is really what Meek was trying to get across. In conclusion, I've proven that this is social rhetoric because of the way that its location. In conclusion, I've shown how this is social rhetoric because of the way it advocates for change and how its location and art exercise psychological power in order to shape knowledge. Social rhetoric is rhetoric used for the purpose of the greater good, And street artists like Meek and Banksy use their art for this end. So this brings us back to the question, why did Banksy shred his artwork? Well, he did this because he understands that in the hands of those with something to say, social rhetoric is the most powerful tool one can have. Thank you.